So, as most of you have heard by now, no doubt, Daniel Penny has been acquitted of criminally negligent homicide after a more serious manslaughter charge was dismissed. A Manhattan jury found Daniel Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide Monday in the death of Jordan Neely on a New York City subway last year. Penny also previously faced a more serious second-degree manslaughter charge, but Judge Maxwell Wiley dismissed it Friday at the request of prosecutors after jurors twice told the court they could not come to a verdict on the count. Penny, a 26-year-old former Marine, would have faced up to 4 years in prison for a criminally negligent homicide conviction and up to 15 years for a manslaughter conviction. The case stems from the death of Neely, a 30-year-old street artist who struggled with homelessness, mental illness, and drugs on a subway car on May 1st, 2023. Neely entered the subway car and began acting erratically as he threw his jacket and yelled at passengers that he was hungry and thirsty and didn't care whether he died, witnesses said. Penny, a passenger, grabbed Neely from behind in a chokehold, forced him to the train floor, and restrained him there for several minutes. When Penny let go of the hold, Neely was non-responsive. He was later declared dead. Prosecutors said Penny acted recklessly and negligently by restraining Neely in a chokehold for so long, even after Neely stopped moving. We are here today because the defendant used way too much force for way too long in way too reckless of a manner, prosecutor Daphne Uran said in closing arguments. His defense had said he was acting to protect others from a threat. Quote, "I wasn't trying to injure him," Penny said in an interview with NYPD investigators shortly after the incident. "I'm just trying to keep him from hurting anybody else he was threatening." So here is a bit of a news report which has some footage from the post-incident interview. So we'll play this.
Behind me, I kind of came like this.
Okay. Did you apply pressure, didn't you?
No, I just wanted to keep him from getting to people.
On day 7 of the high-profile subway chokehold trial in Lower Manhattan, jurors were shown a half-hour-long videotaped interrogation and heard former Marine Daniel Penny recall in his own words what happened. While speaking with detectives, Penny demonstrated the chokehold he used on Jordan Neely, appearing unaware that Neely died shortly afterwards.
I'm not trying to kill the guy.
Right.
All right. So that's part of that interview there. Listen to what these witnesses had to say about Jordan Neely and Daniel Penny situation. Nothing at all about any racial motivation for a white man to kill a black man. So here are some interviews. This is police body cam footage from witnesses shortly after this incident happened on the day of. So we'll take a look at this.
He came in, he put his hand so he could come in, right? Okay. I guess he was pissed or something, but I looked at him, right? And then he started taking off his sweater, dummy hard, and then he threw it. And then he told everyone that he had a rough day and that he don't care what happens today. He don't care about going to jail, but that someone's dying to you.
Bro, move on. You can come to me.
Is that a fight at all? No, he came on the train. I was sitting right there. I was sitting next to everybody that was moving. That was the last one I was sitting. He came on the train. He was like, "Yo, I'm looking for food. I'm looking for this shit." He was ready to risk it all. Basically, he was basically, he's gonna tell the people about to hurt somebody. He was down on the floor. He's like, "I'm ready to hurt somebody. I'm ready to do this." And he was right here. Like I said, I don't think he did nothing wrong. Everybody knew that he was about to start. He about to start hitting people. He came in and he tried to just while the cops was coming. They took everybody. I was falling out home. Yeah. They took man on the cop. He was trying to resist him while somebody came. They took man on.
Okay.
He was on the train. He was right there.
I see him take over the
He got on the train. He dropped his phone. He's like, "I'm ready to hurt anybody. I'm hungry. I'm ready to go back to Market Garden." And dude got up, he saw he was about to hurt somebody, and he got up and he restrained him. And he was trying to blame it. I don't know. You saw everything on everything? No, you saw everything, okay?
She's right here.
Yeah. Okay, what did you see?
What did I see?
I was sitting up there, I heard the young man that's on the floor saying, hey, I'm willing to die, I'll do anything. I'm willing to die. I'll go to jail. I don't care. I don't care. And he was saying it so loud that everyone turned around. So the young man, he got belligerent and he tackled him down. He was tackled in the brown jacket, the one that just went past.
The guy in the brown jacket.
Yeah, you got to see the guy in the brown jacket. Yeah.
You gotta it's for the guys in the briefs. You got a brown jacket, tan jacket. Take him to the briefs right now.
And take it away? So he took him to the ground? The guy with the brown jacket took him to the ground.
Yeah, he took him to the ground and not a hard chokehold, just enough to secure him, and the guy fought. And he kept holding him, all right? And then that's when everybody totally realized what was going on. And I think these guys on drugs, because when he came in, he was unbelievably off the charts. He scared the living daylights out of him.
How did he bring him down to the ground? Like he picked him up and threw him on the ground?
I think he stood up, grabbed him, turned him around, and put him to the ground.
Okay, so that's pretty powerful evidence there. When this story first broke, there were two things that really bothered me about it. The first was, as someone who's ridden the subway thousands of times and have seen literally hundreds, if not thousands, probably thousands of mentally unwell people going off on a rant on a platform or a train, I thought, oh man, this happens all the time. What the hell happened here? Was this worse than the average time? Was this really that much more severe? And you see some real New Yorkers here. Daniel Penny's from Long Island, so he's not a city guy. But some real New Yorkers here seem to be corroborating that, this was not just your average run-of-the-mill rant on a subway from a mentally ill person. So that is pretty powerful in that sense. And, my take on this a year and a half ago didn't please anybody, and my take on this won't please anybody either, because while I do tend to agree with the verdict that this did not rise to the level of criminal negligence, I also don't think the praising of Daniel Penny as a hero is appropriate either. I don't think this should have happened. And the second problem that I had with this was, how does a Marine not know how to restrain a guy without choking him in a way that kills him? He's a Marine. He's a green belt in martial arts. This should not have happened. Now, like I said, that doesn't mean I don't agree with the verdict, because if I do say so myself, I am one of the most steadfastly anti-incarceration people in this space. I believe there's an extremely high bar to clear when it comes to, is someone guilty of a crime that then warrants locking them in a cage for years of their life. Like, if there is not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to vote not guilty. And so I'm not saying the jury made the wrong decision here, but I do think this was a tragic accident and a mistake that should not have happened. Anything before we go on? We have a lot more.
Yeah, so this story was one of the first stories where we had a certain portion of our audience that got angry at both of our takes.
Right.
In my case, at the time, I was pretty much saying what you're saying now. I probably still feel a little more strongly. I mean, at this point, we agree more information has come out that the fear that this person was going to turn violent was legitimate, that it wasn't the normal guy saying stuff on the subway car. Is he a hero? I think it's kind of beside the point. I think dishonest political actors are using it for their own purposes.
Well, that's why I think it's not beside the point.
But
That's why I
you
think
know
it's
what?
important.
Well, in terms of the moral evaluation, like, yeah, I mean, clearly the guy could have defended himself, so he wasn't really at risk. So he didn't have to do that. So in the end, yeah, I think he stepped up to protect people on that subway car. But what they're doing in terms of making him a hero, well, we talk about the woke versus the anti-woke grift. Well, it's the counterpart of what all the DEI race hustling grifters did when this went down. where they all tried to turn it into a racial issue, which it was clearly not. There was reporting at the time, which we just saw now in video, but you had quotes from very diverse people on that subway. This is New York City. We don't have all white people on a subway. That's not even possible. We just don't have those kinds of demographics here. So if you got a bunch of people on the subway saying, yeah, the guy, he stepped up, they're probably not a bunch of white Klansmen saying that.
Well,
And
you just
now
saw
we
that
can-
in the body cam
Now we can
interviews.
see, right,
Yeah.
black, Asian, but the usual suspects, the hustlers, the grifters, they tried to turn it into a race issue that it clearly wasn't. And now you got these people on the other side trying to play up the fact his heroism, rather than, as we're going to get into on the B side of this, it's a tragedy all around. In terms of, should he have known how to restrain him without doing that? Yeah, I don't know why he didn't go for some kind of a hammer lock or something instead of a chokehold, which a chokehold can be dicey, even people who know what they're doing. That's why the police are not, post Eric Garner, they changed the rules. You're not supposed to use a chokehold by definition because accidents can happen. It sounds like what happened is he tried to do it loosely based on the witness testimony, and he kept struggling, and one thing leads to another. And it's just a tragedy. The real tragedy here is that this guy was in that. None of these people should have been in this position, because this guy should have been in a psychiatric institution, as we'll see. There was plenty of opportunity to commit him.
So we have plenty more here. Outside court, Neely's father and a family attorney expressed their disappointment with the jury's verdict and the broader criminal justice system. So here is Jordan Neely's father at the microphone.
I just want to say, I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. Really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now? I had enough of this. System is rigged. Come on, people. Let's do something about this.
Now, I've seen on Twitter a lot of people, where were you for your son when he was homeless and all that? And look, to that, I would say, Jordan Neely's mother was murdered and chopped up and put in a bag. Like, this is just a situation. This is just a level of immiseration that most people know nothing about. And I'm not going to render any judgment on him or his dad or any of that. I know it's easy to do that in 280 characters or whatever there is. But yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Well, and again, I would go back to, it's a failure of the system. We had, while we were covering this when it happened, for years, I had a severely mentally ill person living in my building who was the son of the former landlord. And in the end, it was horrible that he inflicted this on his tenants. He couldn't have him in his house because he had fractured his ribs. He had attacked his father. Now, in the end, and he kept telling me that he kept trying to get him committed, and he could not get the city to do it. So it's not on the father. Clearly, Neely had very severe psychological problems that a civilian like his father is not equipped to deal with. That's not the answer. The system failed him. The city failed Neely, not his father.
Yes, I would agree with that. Penny and his team went to a bar in Lower Manhattan following his acquittal. According to an employee of the bar who spoke with CNN on the phone, Kenneth, the defense attorney, also posted a photo on Instagram of Penny attorney Stephen Reiser and himself holding drinks at the bar. Thank you, Kenneth wrote in the caption. So here is Daniel Penny at the bar after the verdict was handed down.
Yeah.
He's feeling good. He's feeling good. He's feeling good.
What's up? Come together. How's it going? How's it feel?
Feels great. He's finally got the justice he's deserved.
Did you think it was going to happen?
Sorry? No, we think that this should have happened probably on day one, but the point thing is it happened. So we can't control the timing of it, but we can certainly savor the outcome.
And why do you think it was not guilty?
That's
Instead of
That's that guy.
Well, he's not guilty on a few different reasons. Because his actions were justified. He was trying to help people on that train, and he did. And number two, he's not responsible for the death because the death was caused by a lot of other factors that we tried to present with a lot of clarity, such as the K2 abuse and the sickling crisis. And cardiac issues, not to mention the paranoid schizophrenia, which only added to that impact. So I'm just glad that the jury was able to truly evaluate that as a potential cause of death, and that Danny was justified in the actions that he took.
All right. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg issued a statement saying the office followed the facts and evidence from beginning to end and noted the jury's careful deliberation of the case. Their lengthy deliberation and the totality of the facts and the evidence underscored why this case was put in front of a jury of Mr. Penny's peers, he said in the statement. The jury has now spoken. At the Manhattan DA's office, we deeply respect the jury process and we respect their verdict. New York Mayor Eric Adams connected Neely's death to his broader criticisms of the broken mental health system. Jordan should not have had to die, he said, and I strongly believe, as I've been stating probably from day one, we have a mental health system that is broken. When you have someone repeatedly going through that system, that's a signature of failure, and we need help in Albany and in the city council. We can't sit back and mourn the loss of someone that is caught up in the system when we're not taking action every day. So I agree with all of that. But a jury of his peers heard the case, saw all the facts and all the evidence, and made a decision. And I joined DA Bragg in stating that I respect the process, he said. The trial.
I'm just going to say, I believe that is very indicative of the post-Trump tone that Democrats are setting now. I think if this had been 2 years ago, you would have heard all the, but particularly from Bragg, maybe not from Adams.
Not from Adams. I mean,
definitely from Bragg. You would have heard all the, this shows how hard it is for people of color to get justice in this city. Well, I read this as very much the whole Democratic Party is very chastened about hitting those kinds of notes. No, there is no way. Bragg brought the case in the first place, which you could argue never should have been brought.
See, I wouldn't argue it should have never been brought. I think this warranted an investigation. Now, of course,
It warranted an investigation.
I'm not a juror, but I don't know. I mean, I think in the end,
I think they've been chastened. I think they're afraid to hit that note now.
I mean, I think the evidence in the case was clear enough that the not guilty verdict was the proper verdict. But
that's not that. When is that ever stopped them? I respect the process.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, but I'm saying when you see them hitting that, especially Alvin Bragg, who is not shy about playing identity politics. No. For him on this very politically charged case that he certainly ginned up at the beginning to now say, yeah, I respect the process. That's a result of Trump's victory, I believe. I think they would have framed this very differently a couple of years ago.
The trial began with jury selection in late October and featured testimony, video, and 911 calls from subway riders, responding police officers, and martial arts and medical experts. The prosecution called more than 30 witnesses to the stand, including one man who helped restrain Neely's arms during the struggle and testified he advised Penny to loosen his grip. I'm going to grab his hand so you can let go, Eric Gonzalez told Penny, according to his testimony. However, Gonzalez could be heard in video footage of the incident saying Penny wasn't squeezing Neely's neck in the 51 seconds before he released the chokehold. Gonzalez also testified he initially lied to investigators about what he saw. What's that? Oh, lied. Sorry about it.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, Gonzalez also testified he initially lied to investigators about what he saw and did on the subway out of fear he would be pinned for the killing. Prosecutors promised not to charge him in the case, he testified. Okay, so here is some video. This is part of that original report we played. But here is the martial arts instructor talking about the chokehold.
The witness also testified, a Marine who trained Daniel Penny. The combat instructor said if done right, the chokehold should knock out a person without killing them. But if held too long, the technique could end a person's life in a matter of minutes. Once the person is rendered unconscious, that's when you're supposed to let go, he told the jury. And Cynthia Harris, a city medical examiner, took the stand late yesterday telling jurors that Neely's cause of death was compression of the neck, consistent with the use of a chokehold.
All right, so I want to go through this a little bit because, like I said earlier, this was the second part of the story that didn't sit right with me. That the guy's a Marine and he can't restrain someone without choking him to death. That was always like, wow, what happened there? Daniel Penny's martial arts instructor testifies in NYC subway chokehold death. So this was an article put out the day after this testimony. Prosecutors called Joseph Kaballer, Penny's Marine Corps martial arts instructor, to the stand. He testified Penny attained a green belt, which is like a moderate belt, I guess. During training, he said warnings are given not to hold a choke longer than 5 seconds. On cross, he told defense attorneys 5 seconds is not applicable to a real-world situation, saying a, quote, situation dictates. Kaballer told the jury applying a choke properly would, quote, render your aggressor unconscious. Then they're told to release pressure immediately, otherwise it could lead to injury or death. Kaballer explained a blood choke is when pressure is applied to carotid arteries on both sides of the neck and shoulder, render someone unconscious in between 8 to 13 seconds. He explained an air choke is when pressure is applied directly to the trachea and would take 2 to 3 minutes for someone to lose consciousness. Because it would take that long, he explained, it is not taught. Prosecutors took him frame by frame through Penny's hold on Neely. At times, he testified Penny appeared to be doing a figure 4 variation, a form of a blood choke, but that he didn't appear to be doing it correctly. In one particular frame, Kaballer said it appeared Penny's forearm was pressing against Neely's trachea. So is this an improper blood choke? Prosecutors asked. Yeah, Kaballer said. Is it potentially lethal? Prosecutors asked. Yes, absolutely, Kaballer said. On cross-examination, defense attorneys asked, it may also be there is low pressure to the trachea and more to the right side of the neck. Correct, Kaballer said. So someone could stay in a chokehold for longer than 13 seconds and not be rendered unconscious if they're not applying pressure, defense attorneys asked. Correct, Kaballer said. He also said it was hard to tell if pressure was being applied or not at certain times in the video, and that during a struggle, arm placements can shift sometimes, impacting the trachea. Kaballer added he couldn't tell from the video whether Penny was ever applying a full blood or air choke. Okay, so we'll read this last. This is from the CNN article that I was using. The city medical examiner who performed Neely's autopsy, testifying for the prosecution, ruled the cause of his death was compression of neck, chokehold. She made the determination after performing an autopsy and watching the cell phone video on the subway, but did not wait for the toxicology report, she testified. The defense presented its own medical expert who said Neely died of a combination of factors, including a sickling crisis linked to his sickle cell trait, a schizophrenic episode, the struggle and restraint by Penny, and K2 intoxication. Okay, so this is where I have to go back to my original take, which is sure to please no one, which is that I believe there is some evidence here of negligence. I do. He's a Marine. He's an intermediate martial artist. He placed the guy in a chokehold. The martial artist instructor said he didn't apply it the right way. To me, that is some evidence to say that this was negligent. Now, on a jury, some evidence is not enough. Evidence has to cross the threshold of true beyond a reasonable doubt. That is where, as a juror, I have to, with some reservation, endorse the verdict, because there's just not proof. There's just not proof. And without proof, I can't vote to lock a guy in a cage without proof. I just can't get there. But this idea that no, there was nothing wrong with this. He was he behaved perfectly, as we're going to see some of the chuds. That's nonsense. You can't say behave perfectly. This was a mistake. This was an error. We know it was an error. By definition, it was an accident. So to me, that's where this next part gets into some, I think, irresponsible commentary on this, which we'll get into in a minute. But go ahead.
Yeah, look, I'm not a martial arts expert, and I wasn't in the situation, so I'm hesitant to, make a judgment in that way. I don't understand why. There are other holds that I know from wrestling that do not involve anything that could possibly be fatal. So I don't understand if you have that kind of training, why you wouldn't choose one of many holds.
That's what I mean.
Mobilize without killing. That is true. I think he made a terrible mistake. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. Clearly, he meant well. I don't think no one is saying he meant to
even the
choke this
prosecutor
guy
said
out.
he didn't mean it. Right.
And nobody thinks he was trying to do that. I think he definitely made an error in judgment in choosing a type of hold that is notorious for having unpredictable results.
Right. And the question is, does that rise to criminal negligence? That's the question. And to me, if I can't say that beyond a reasonable doubt, I have to vote not guilty. That's why at the end of the day, I can't say I disagree with the verdict, but it does hurt. It stings. This was a fuck up. This was a fuck up. This was not, well, we'll get to this part. Okay, so here we go. These fucking people now. Daniel Penny now has his freedom. He should also have the Medal of Freedom for the courage he displayed on the train that day and during the ordeal that followed. Maybe with Trump coming in, that might actually happen. Daniel Penny needs to leave NYC and never return. Come down here to Tennessee. We'll welcome you like the hero you are. Well, apparently, Matt, you've never been to Long Island, because Long Island's pretty fucking cringe, too.
Or Staten Island, they'll be very happy.
Or Staten Island. He's got some options
happy.
A little
You
closer
can move to Howard Beach.
Yeah. Tennessee, that's a little extreme.
Doesn't have to go that far. I also want to remind y'all, Matt Walsh is the same guy who tried to say that people were reacting the way they did to the death of the CEO because he's white.
No, a lot of these fucking people, and this is why, I don't think it was a racist incident, but the commentary, there's a lot of schadenfreude from these fucking scumbags that a white guy choked a black guy to death.
Right. Well, this is any way you slice it.
Yeah.
And I, from the beginning, was arguing, hey, if you've never been in that situation on a train, you don't understand. There's a reason. He had reason to feel these people were threatened, especially as information came out about the people he really did severely attack.
Well, that's the thing. That's important evidence because, look, it's one thing for an out-of-towner to get spooked, right, and overreact because they're not used to dealing with, people like that on the subway. The fact that you had clear born and bred New Yorkers tell the cops, no, this was especially alarming.
Well, and there's reason to believe it because he had bashed people's faces in the past.
Exactly.
But everyone should be reacting to this if you're a decent human being, as is a terrible situation no one involved should have been in. Penny shouldn't have been in that situation. Neely shouldn't have been in that situation. It didn't have to go down like this. He had been in psychiatric treatment centers multiple times. He was well known to the authorities. He was on a special list of 50 most at-risk people that they keep.
Right.
And what was he on that? Why was he on that train? Why was he walking around the streets like that?
Exactly. Greg Gutfeld. Hooray for Daniel Penny and those heroes who risk everything to help others. And a more than deserved fuck you to Alvin Bragg. Jack Posobiec. Daniel Penny did nothing wrong. In fact, Daniel Penny did everything right. Now, this is what I say. How can you say he did everything right? The martial arts instructor said he either applied the wrong chokehold or he applied what would have been an appropriate chokehold the wrong way. So how can you say he did everything right? I mean, that's just factually not true. If he did everything right,
because they're grifters too. This is the irony. Look, yeah, Alvin Bragg is definitely one of those political figures who likes to play identity politics. But so is Jack Posobiec. So is Matt Walsh. It's just the other side of it. It's the same very dishonest spin on a complicated situation.
Exactly. All right. So these are replies to Jack Posobiec's tweet. Yes, he did. More men should act like this when others are in danger. This is a huge win for society. You do not want to live in a society where men are afraid to protect others from violent criminals if they fear they will be punished for it. Piers Morgan announced the verdict. Breaking, Daniel Penny is cleared, justice for a hero. Shocking that this ever came to court. Now, he had a panel here. We're only going to hear his take on this because this was very long. We could have done a whole segment on this. But here's Piers Morgan's take on this, more or less, in
Is
a
that
nutshell.
Taylor Lorenz?
Yep, he had Taylor Lorenz, Tommy Lahren, and
She
Mark
took the mask
Lamont
off
Hill.
for the segment?
Yeah, I guess she was in her own private room there. Yeah. All right, here we go.
That a war hero, the idea that a war hero is in his civilian life on a subway and watches a completely deranged lunatic threatening to kill people, and he apprehends him and prevents him from harming anybody, and in the process, clearly, accidentally, didn't mean to do this, the guy falls unconscious and then he dies. And it's a tragic accident that happened, but it was entirely precipitated by this deranged lunatic going on a subway and threatening to kill people. A subway system.
Which I'm just going to point out, why are you using that language, man?
Well, Mark Lamont Hill calls him out for that.
Like it's tragic. It's sad.
Right.
It's sad. This isn't a guy to heap scorn.
No, well, this is what I mean. They call him a maniac.
There, but for the grace of God.
Right.
And by the way, in New York, where people have been.
I'm glad you paused it there. We don't have this as part of the piece because this was minutes later. But Mark Lamont Hill does call him on that. He says, "You're calling this guy a deranged lunatic. What he is a mentally ill person."
Right.
Like you're using very charged language to describe this guy, which shows a complete lack of sympathy for this guy. Which, yes, is somewhat a function of the fact that he's a black man. Yes, there is. Like that's true. Piers Morgan, this is a fucking. I mean, this is. I mean, I got to watch what I say here, but Piers Morgan, the tears he shed for the death of the Queen tells you who he is. How any Indian person could have a bad word to say about the Queen after she died. That tells you what he is. He's a fucking racist piece of shit. That's who Piers Morgan is, and it comes through in that language. A lot of times it slips out in subconscious ways. Yes.
Sure.
Threatening to kill people. A subway system, by the way, in New York, where people have been killed quite regularly in recent years.
Oh, yeah, we got it. Okay,
no, they haven't.
Well, we're going to get to that. Okay, so I got to back this up because we have to vet this claim.
Happened, but it was entirely precipitated by this deranged lunatic going on a subway and threatening to kill people. A subway system, by the way, in New York, where people have been killed quite regularly in recent years. This guy is a hero, and yet he was treated like a criminal.
Okay, so a subway system where people have been killed quite regularly in recent years.
He should have had Cash Jordan on for this.
Yeah, no, exactly. That is an absolute lie. An absolute lie. And this is why I think it is important, not just from a culture war perspective, but from a public safety standpoint, to not turn Daniel Penny into a hero who modeled great behavior. Because I will tell you, as someone who lived in New York City for a while, as someone who spent my whole life in commuting distance of New York City and has gone to New York City for a while, you get on the subway, odds are better than 50-50 you're going to run into a person who's acting in a way that might make a person who's not used to dealing with that somewhat uncomfortable. But the risk to your life on the New York City subways, contrary to what Piers Morgan just said, is absolutely minimal. Now, the New York Post will try and scare you with bullshit like this, and this is probably where Piers Morgan gets this idea. Murders soar 60% on New York City subways, nearing record. This was published in the New York Post September of this year. So that sounds pretty crazy. You might think, Keaton, what are you saying? Murders are up 60%. Murders across the city subway system have surged 60% so far this year, a troubling trend as overall crime on the rails has dipped. So how many murders are we up to now? What's the 60% surge brought us to? 8. 8 people have been slaughtered on subway cars or in stations as of September 8th up from just 5 during the same period last year, according to NYPD data. The spike in killings is approaching the 25-year high set in 2022 with 10 murders. From 1997 to 2020, there were never more than 5 murders in the subway in a single year, according to the earliest public NYPD data. The jump in murders persists despite a slew of high-profile initiatives that have helped tamp down an early-year surge in crime underground. Heavily trafficked stations were flooded with 750 National Guardsmen, while an additional 1,000 NYPD officers were deployed to monitor the subway system. So 8 murders this year. The median over the last 25 years, about 5 murders. You know how many trips there are taken on the New York City subway every year? You know how many people boarded a train, or how many trains were boarded by a person? Because obviously people take the trains multiple times a year. You know how many subway trips there were, train trips? Over 2 billion. 2 billion subway rides. 5 murders a year. Up to 8 murders a year now. Out of 2 billion. You do the math, it's like 1 in 250 million. These odds are as though there's 1 murder a year in the entire United States. You have as good odds of being that one person in the whole country. If there were 1 murder a year committed in the whole country, you have a better chance of being that one person than you do of being killed on the New York City subway. And Piers Morgan says, well, people get killed regularly on the subway now. So you say, well, maybe murders are up slightly, but maybe overall crime is up too. Well, no, total subway crime has decreased nearly 6% this year compared with the same period in 2023. Robberies down 18, felony assaults dropping 5, according to an NYPD spokesperson. Violent crime remains well above pre-pandemic levels, however, and strap hangers continue to sweat whether their next ride will be on the Murder Express, the editorializing from the New York Post, of course.
Because of fine outlets like your own.
Right.
They might feel that way. Doesn't mean it's real.
Exactly. You don't know if you're going to make it home, retiree Vicky Reeves, 68, bemoaned while making a rare subway trip at the Times Square station.
You can always find one.
Yeah. And look at one more thing here. Angela McArdle, Libertarian Party chair, huge win for humanity. Now, that is a depraved statement on multiple levels. Number one, the reason I put this where I put it is because you guys are the ones who canceled Chase Oliver for wearing a mask. Now, I have to say, I'm not a mask wearer myself, but I just gave you the numbers. 8 in 2 billion. You're actually much more likely to die of COVID than you are to get murdered on the subway. So the reason I say that is because to people who think that this is model behavior and that you ought to initiate a violent confrontation with anyone who you perceive to be a threat to people's safety on the subway, let me tell you something. If you're an out-of-towner and you come in and you do that, odds are you're going to overreact to someone who's not a threat, and you're going to make the situation much, much worse than it could have been. That is what it will happen if this behavior is modeled, if Daniel Penny is put up there as an exemplar of what everybody should do and what they perceive to be that situation. 999 out of 1,000 of these types of situations are not as severe as this one. And my main concern out of this is that now people are going to say, well, self-defense is legal in New York City, which means anybody who's causing a problem, we can just go at them. And in someone who's ridden the subway thousands of times, I know Russell can vouch for me on this, 999 out of every 1,000 times at least, you're better off just minding your business. And I don't think that's as likely to happen now because of this. And just, again, to call this a win for humanity, as if there's anything to celebrate in this story, is fucking depraved. Fucking sick and depraved.
Now, what's really depraved about look, I am of the opinion that this guy did do something to protect other people.
I have to repeat it. I don't disagree with the verdict. I would have voted not guilty because I don't think the evidence rises to beyond a doubt.
Right. Yeah. So we agree that the guy did he meant well.
Yeah.
Now, to react to it as a triumph for humanity and not as a tragic situation where Penny should not have had to do that And this guy should not have been there to do it in the first place because he had been in and out of the system. That is what makes this a tragic situation. And as you point out, yeah, there are crazy situations all over New York. There are a lot of mentally ill people. I mentioned this on the show when I came back from Europe. I wasn't used to it. This is about a year ago now. I was in Italy and Greece for a month, and one of the biggest elements of culture shock for me, probably the biggest, is it took me like a week or two to get used to people just talking to themselves on the subway again, because we're so trained here to just accept that severely mentally ill people are left on the street to fend for themselves with no help from anybody, and we just ignore that. It becomes part of the culture. They become invisible to you. No joke. I was waiting because I just will not pay $80 to take an Uber from the airport. So I was waiting for the subway at like 2:00 in the morning to go home when I got back. And there were two girls from Paris on the platform with me. And they get on the train and they turn around and get off. I get on. There is a woman naked from the waist down, yelling on the train car. That was my first reintroduction to my native land. Didn't see any shit like that in Greece or Italy. And you know what? Those are not the richest countries in the EU. Those are among the poorest countries in the EU. And you don't see things like that. It is a very uniquely American thing as far as Western countries go, that you just leave people like that. And the idea, and again, I'm not throwing shade at Penny by saying this, I'm really not. But the idea that vigilantism as a response to desperate mental illness is something to celebrate. That is a reflection of the worst of the American psyche, self-image, and national character.
Yep, I agree. And I think that's very well said. And before we go on to the next part of the piece, we'll take a little bit of super chats in between. I just want to say, because I don't want people to mistake what I said to mean that Penny should have just minded his own business. No, I think he did what he tried to do the right thing by intervening to protect people, since this guy was getting up in people's face and making explicit threats. I'm not saying he should have minded his own business. I think he made a mistake in how he handled it, which is pretty obvious. I mean, it's obvious. The martial arts teacher said he either applied the wrong chokehold or he applied it the wrong way, and the guy's dead. Right? Now, once again, I don't believe that the evidence is there to prove that that mistake rises to criminal negligence. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying he should have minded his own business in this situation. I'm saying I know New Yorkers and I know tourists. Okay, I lived in New York City. I worked in tourism. What I fear is going to happen much more often now is an out-of-towner is going to get on the subway at Times Square, and a homeless guy's going to shake a cup in his face and say, "You got him," and he's going to fucking go at him. He's going to think, "Here we go again. This is another Jordan Neely thing," and then you're going to have a violent incident where you could just say what I've said thousands of times to people, which is, "Sorry, man, I don't have anything." Right? Yep. And in that case, they walk away, no matter how scary they look. When you tell them, "Sorry, I don't got," they leave you alone. That's all it has to do. And I'm afraid that because of this verdict, you're going to have a lot of the former. You're going to have a lot of people thinking, "Here we go again. We got another Neely on our hand." And I'm telling you, that's not good. So listen, if you're from Middle America and you idolize Daniel Penny, Uber and Lyft. The subway is not for you. You don't have the fortitude. This is the other thing that drives me crazy about this is these people like to pound their chests as if they're big men for thinking how bravely he acted. You know what? You're a fucking pussy. Get in a cab, get where you have to go, in your car, in privacy. You don't have the fortitude to ride the subway if you're going to react hysterically to a guy who poses no threat. I am not saying that Jordan Neely posed no threat and that Daniel Penny was wrong to act. I'm saying people are going to take from this that they are the next vigilante in a situation that could be diffused very easily by a simple, "Sorry, man." That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out whenever I hear these kinds of things, do I look like I'm from the muscle end of the family? You know, I've lived in New York pretty much my entire life without incident. How dangerous could it be? I was a tour guide for 10 years, riding the subway, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day.
8 murders and 2 billion rides. That
Nothing.
says it all.
Nothing.
That says it all.
No, this is why some of you know his channel. I did a whole thing about it at the live show. This is a whole grift. He's not the only one who does it. The LA is falling apart. San Francisco is falling apart. Now, I can't speak to those. Our friend Lee Fong said that's exaggerated, but I don't know. I'm not there. But I can tell you in terms of New York, wow, that is some grift. That is some grift, man. This guy, Cash Jordan, he has a channel where all he does is lie about what's happening in New York. But people like that morality tale because a lot of people feel that New York, like San Francisco, like LA, it's one of those blue liberal cities that have turned their back on God or whatever. And so, hearing that it's falling apart, that it's collapsing, they love that myth. They love that story. So he'll just say, and so it begins. Almost every title to his videos have that in the title card. It begins. People stop paying for the subway. Don't come here and try to do that.
Of course, it's ridiculous. So this whole thing, in the New York Post, they sell papers out of it. The Murder Express. Get the fuck out of here. I mean, what a ridiculous headline.
Please clap.